There is a place within you where clarity lives. It's not noisy. It's not desperate. It doesn't crave applause. It's quiet, grounded, and it knows exactly who you are meant to become. But most people never reach that place because they're too busy tuning into everything and everyone except themselves. You were born with a brain capable of rewiring itself every single day. That means you are not fixed. You are not stuck. You are not defined by yesterday's limitations. Every act of focus, every decision to rise when it's easier to retreat creates a chemical and structural change inside your nervous system. That's not philosophy. That's biology. So the question is, where is your attention going? Because your focus is not free. It's the most valuable currency you have. When you give it to distractions, to comparisons, to people who don't even know your potential, you just bankrupt your future. But when you direct that focus inward, when you say, I'm building something within me that the world can't see yet, that's when transformation begins. You don't need to be louder. You need to be clearer. You don't need more approval. You need more alignment. Stop waiting for others to validate your mission. If the vision was given to you, it wasn't a conference call. It was divine, sacred, meant to be protected and pursued in silence until it becomes too obvious to ignore. This is not about selfishness. It's about stewardship. It's about stewardship. You are the steward of your body, your brain, your time, your purpose. You have been entrusted with potential. Focusing on you is not neglecting the world. It's preparing to serve it with excellence. Progress is not always visible, but it is always happening if you stay consistent. Every deep breath instead of a scroll, every morning sunlight exposure instead of more sleep, every moment of resistance met with discipline, those are votes for the future version of you. And hear this clearly. Your nervous system does not care about your feelings. It responds to behavior. So if you want to feel better, start doing better. Train your brain to celebrate effort, not just outcomes. Find joy in the climb, not just the summit. Because winning is not a moment, it's a pattern. It's built in the repetition. It's built in those quiet hours where you choose focus over comfort, vision over noise, and purpose over popularity. Neuroplasticity is one of the most powerful truths about the human brain. It means that your brain is not a fixed structure, but a dynamic, ever-changing network. Every thought you think, every behavior you repeat, and every environment you expose yourself to is shaping and reshaping the very wiring of your nervous system. This is not metaphorical. It's literal biology. The brain forms new connections, strengthens old ones, and prunes away those that are no longer useful. It's responding to how you live, not just what you want. That's why intention without action changes nothing, but intentional action. That's the gateway to transformation. Your habits are not just patterns of behavior, they are patterns of brain circuitry. Repeated action lays down myelin insulation that makes neural signals faster and more efficient. So if you consistently direct your attention and energy toward discipline, focus, and learning, your brain adapts to make those processes more automatic. It doesn't matter how distracted or undisciplined you've been in the past. What matters is what you consistently do now. That's the beauty of neuroplasticity. It doesn't care who you were, only who you're becoming through your daily behavior. When you begin a new habit or skill, your brain initially resists because the unfamiliar requires more energy. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for conscious decision-making, has to be active, but the more you repeat a task, the less energy it takes. Eventually, it moves to subcortical structures where it becomes automatic. That's the difference between effortful practice and embodied identity. You don't just practice focus, you become someone who is focused. You don't just resist distraction, you stop identifying with it altogether. The shift isn't in willpower, it's in wiring. But plasticity cuts both ways. If you repeatedly scroll, avoid hard things, or reinforce negative self-talk, those circuits also strengthen. The brain is agnostic. It doesn't judge the inputs. It just strengthens what is repeated. That's why awareness is critical. If you don't consciously choose what to reinforce, the world will do it for you. And the algorithms of the world are not designed for your greatness. They're designed for your attention. This is where your environment and routines become crucial. The brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's in constant conversation with your physical surroundings, your light exposure, your movement, your relationships. All of these are inputs that signal the brain on what to prioritize. For example, early morning sunlight doesn't just wake you up. It sets your circadian rhythm, which impacts your mood, focus, and sleep. Movement doesn't just strengthen your muscles. It increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which is like fertilizer for your neurons. Your biology is always listening, always adapting. Your role is to give it the right instructions. Another powerful element of neuroplasticity is the role of emotional salience. The brain pays more attention to what you emotionally engage with. If you anchor your routines to purpose, not just obligation, the learning sticks deeper. If you visualize your goals in vivid detail, what they look like, feel like, sound like, you engage more regions of the brain, increasing the likelihood of behavioral follow-through. This isn't about a positive thinking. It's about engaging the hippocampus and amygdala in a way that makes your goals feel biologically relevant. The more real it feels, the more real it becomes. It just requires more deliberate action. Children's brains are naturally more plastic, but adults have the advantage of consciousness and intention. With structured practice, adequate rest, and meaningful repetition, adult brains change in profound ways. The process is slower, but it's no less powerful. The key is consistency. That's what signals to the brain. This matters. Every single day is a vote cast toward the kind of brain you're building. It's not about radical overhauls. It's about small, repeated shifts. Focus for 10 minutes longer. Breathe deeper. Delay the impulse. Move your body. Speak truth to yourself. These aren't just habits. They're neurobiological instructions. And the more you honor them, the more your brain becomes an ally in your mission, not a saboteur. This is the science of becoming. Where you place your visual attention determines what your brain prioritizes, learns from, and builds upon. The eyes are not just passive organs for sight. They are extensions of the brain itself. In fact, parts of your retina are made from neural tissue. This means that where you look and what you consistently bring into your field of view directly impacts how your nervous system functions and what it considers important. Visual attention is not just about what you see, it's about what your brain believes is worth building neural architecture around. When you lock your gaze onto a target, whether it's a physical object, a written word, or a specific task, you are signaling to the brain, this is important to the brain. This is important. In response, the brain ramps up activity in areas related to focus, cognition, and memory consolidation. Your visual system is tightly linked with your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for higher order thinking, planning, and decision making. This means that intentional visual focus literally activates the brain's executive command centers. The more deliberately you direct your visual attention, the more you engage the circuits that create order, structure, and purpose in your life. The opposite is also true. When your visual attention is fragmented, when you're constantly switching between tabs, glancing at your phone, and allowing your eyes to bounce between irrelevant stimuli, you fragment your thinking. The brain mirrors the behavior of the eyes. If your gaze is scattered, your cognitive resources are dispersed. Creates a state of internal noise where signal is hard to detect amidst the distractions. The brain stops forming strong, coherent patterns because it's being told over and over again that nothing really matters. Attention becomes diluted. Presence becomes impossible. There's powerful science behind the way visual attention can enhance neuroplasticity. When your eyes fixate on a target and your mind follows suit, your brain enters a mode of heightened learning. It starts releasing acetylcholine, a neuromodulator that sharpens perception and strengthens synaptic connections. This is especially critical when building new skills, habits, or perspectives. You're not just training your mind, you're training your biology to rewire itself according to what you're visually and mentally engaging with. Even stress and emotional regulation are influenced by visual patterns. When you engage in panoramic vision, allowing your gaze to soften and take in the entire visual field, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which reduces stress and lowers cortisol levels. This is why being in nature, watching a sunset, or even just looking out across a horizon can calm your body and clear your mind. Conversely, when you're locked in tunnel vision, staring at a screen, obsessively focused on stressors, you trigger the sympathetic nervous system, which prepares the body for fight or flight. Your visual behavior can shift your physiological state within seconds. The implications are profound. What you focus on literally becomes your internal reality. If you constantly fixate on what's missing, broken, or threatening, your brain strengthens the circuits of fear, anxiety, and lack. But if you train yourself to look for patterns of progress, opportunities for growth, and points of beauty, the brain begins to orient toward gratitude, motivation, and solution-focused thinking. You are not just interpreting the world, you are shaping your neural architecture to fit the lens through which you choose to see it. This is why environments matter. If you're always looking at clutter, noise, and chaos, your brain mirrors that disarray. But when you organize your space, limit your visual inputs, and intentionally bring meaningful imagery or words into your line of sight, you prime your mind for clarity. The goal isn't perfection, it's alignment. Your eyes should be trained to lock onto what you want your life to reflect. Visual attention then is not a soft concept. It's a hard science rooted in the way neurons fire and wire. What you look at with intention, repetition, and purpose becomes the scaffolding for the life you're building. One synapse, one gaze, one focused breath at a time. Your daily actions are not isolated moments. They are neural votes cast toward your future identity. The brain thrives on rhythm and predictability. It uses your repeated behaviors to decide what to automate, what to prioritize, and what to disregard. This means that your daily protocols, the routines you follow consistently, building blocks of your internal and external reality. They don't just influence your mood or productivity for the day. They fundamentally reshape your biology, behavior, and destiny over time. Every morning you wake up, your brain is in a unique state of heightened neuroplasticity. What you choose to do in the first 60 to 90 minutes after waking sends a signal to your entire system. Here's what matters today. If you start your day by reaching for your phone, diving into notifications, and absorbing fragmented information, you teach your nervous system to be reactive. Your focus scatters, your stress response activates, and your dopamine system begins chasing novelty instead of depth. But if you start your day with intention, exposing yourself to natural light, hydrating your body, moving your limbs, and anchoring your thoughts and purpose, you align your biology with clarity and control. That's not just mindset. That's chemistry and physiology working in your favor. Oh boy, you're in your favor. The power of protocols lies in their consistency. Your brain doesn't need grand gestures. It needs repetition. Something as simple as getting 10 to 15 minutes of natural light exposure in the early morning doesn't just regulate your sleep cycle, it also improves mood, increases alertness, and synchronizes your circadian rhythm. This one act influences cortisol release, dopamine tone, and melatonin production later that night. It's a simple behavior with compounding biological benefits. And when repeated daily, it becomes part of a neurochemical infrastructure that supports long-term mental and physical performance. Movement is another critical protocol. When you engage in deliberate physical activity, whether it's a brisk walk, resistance training, or breath work, you're not just benefiting your muscles, you're flooding the brain with BDNF, a protein that acts like Miracle-Gro for your neurons. This enhances learning, focus, and resilience. Movement shifts your state. It transforms sluggish energy into clarity and primes your system for focused work and emotional regulation. Protocols around movement don't have to be extreme. They just have to be consistent. Because your nervous system doesn't reward intensity as much as it rewards repetition. Nutrition, hydration, and sleep are equally essential pillars. Your brain is a high-performance organ. It requires glucose, amino acids, healthy fats, and micronutrients to function optimally. When you fuel it with high-quality inputs at predictable times, you reinforce metabolic stability and cognitive efficiency. Similarly, when your sleep protocol is protected by avoiding bright artificial light at night, by managing caffeine timing, and by winding down the mind, you give the brain space to repair, consolidate memory, and regulate emotion. Sleep is not optional for growth. It's the cornerstone of transformation. Every late night or erratic sleep schedule disrupts the very system you're trying to strengthen. Your environment also becomes part of your protocol. The cues around you, your workspace, lighting even scent, either support or sabotage your focus. When you intentionally design your space for clarity, your brain doesn't have to waste energy managing distractions. Over time, these environmental signals become triggers for deep work, calm, or creative flow. That's not magic, it's neuroassociation. What matters most is that your protocols align with your goals because your brain tracks what you do, not what you intend. You may want focus, health, and growth, but if your daily actions feed chaos, fatigue, and distraction, that's what your system will learn to automate. Protocols are how you teach your brain and body what to expect, how to behave. So every time you act with consistency and intention, even in small ways, you're not just organizing your day, you're shaping your destiny, because who you become is not determined by what you dream about once in a while. It's determined by what you repeat with discipline daily. Dopamine is one of the most misunderstood molecules in human biology. It is not just the chemical of pleasure. It is the driver of motivation, pursuit, and anticipation. It doesn't reward you for achieving your goal. It drives you to want the goal. To want the goal. This is why dopamine is more about the journey than the destination. It is a directional signal. It shows you where your attention, energy, and behavior are being pulled. And if you learn to work with it properly, it becomes a compass guiding your growth. But if you misuse it, if you rely on it as a crutch, you'll find yourself constantly chasing stimulation, addicted to novelty, and unable to stay grounded in long-term pursuit. Every time you check your phone for a message or a quick hit of entertainment, you experience a small spike in dopamine. The problem isn't the spike, it's the frequency and randomness. When these bursts are unpredictable and unearned, your dopamine system becomes dysregulated. You begin to associate effort with boredom and passivity with pleasure. Over time, the baseline levels of dopamine start to drop, making it harder to feel motivated or engaged with activities that don't provide immediate gratification. This is why people can scroll for hours, but struggle to sit through 30 minutes of focused work. But dopamine is not the enemy. It's the teacher. It's showing you what you've been training your nervous system to value. And the beautiful truth is that dopamine systems are trainable. You can recalibrate them to find meaning and drive in things that truly matter to you. Deep work, long-term goals, health, relationships, learning. The way to do that is to shift your reward system from outcomes to effort. When you attach dopamine to the process itself, when you tell yourself, I'm proud of showing up, I'm energized by doing hard things, or grow through every repetition, you begin to create what's called dopaminergic sustainability. This means your motivation is not dependent on quick wins. It becomes intrinsic, stable, and aligned with values. The brain begins to release dopamine during the effort, not just after the reward. This rewires your relationship with work, discipline, and discomfort. There is neuroscience behind this. Dopamine is released from the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and travels to the nucleus, accumbens, and prefrontal cortex. When you expect a reward, dopamine ramps up. But if you only allow it to spike when external validation arrives, you're at the mercy of circumstances. You become fragile in your pursuit. On the other hand, if you condition yourself to experience a dopamine rise during each small action, each rep, each study session, each aligned behavior, you regain agency over your energy system. This is not about pretend everything feels good. It's about recognizing the internal reward that comes from integrity with your purpose. It's about training your system to associate meaning with progress, not just results. In this way, dopamine becomes your compass. It points you toward what is congruent with your higher aim. And if that aim is shallow, if it's just about being seen or winning quickly or feeling high, you'll find your motivation brittle and fleeting. But if your aim is service, mastery, or personal transformation, dopamine becomes a renewable fuel source. Or to make this practical, begin to notice when you feel anticipation or motivation. Ask yourself, what am I rewarding in this moment? If it's distraction, convenience, or appearance, then you are using dopamine as a crutch. But if it's effort, clarity, or alignment with your deeper values, then you are using dopamine as a compass. And over time, that distinction will define the arc of your life. You can't eliminate dopamine, nor should you try. You were designed to chase. And the key is to choose the right chase, one that honors your potential and makes you stronger with each step. Solitude, when approached with intention, is one of the most powerful environments for mental clarity, emotional regulation, and personal transformation. It is often misunderstood in a society that glorifies constant connectivity, and external validation.
Oh, yeah.
Many fear being alone because they equate solitude with loneliness. But sacred solitude is not about isolation. It's about alignment. It is the deliberate act of creating space to hear your own thoughts without interference, to recalibrate your nervous system, and to access a deeper intelligence that gets drowned out in the noise of daily life. When you're alone, without the distraction of other people's expectations, opinions, and energy, your brain enters a different mode of operation. This isn't just psychological, it's neurological. The brain's default mode network becomes active, which is responsible for introspection, memory consolidation, self-awareness, and creativity. In solitude, you are not doing nothing. You are giving the mind room to process, integrate, and restructure information. Small mind structure information. You are stepping away from the task-driven, reactive state and entering a space where insight can emerge. This is when true problem solving and original thought occur, not in the noise of a crowd, but in the quiet of your own consciousness. Solitude also helps to reset your dopamine system. In an overstimulated world, we are constantly chasing micro rewards, messages, likes, comments, scrolling. This rapid dopamine cycling burns out your motivation and numbs your ability to find joy in simplicity. But when you remove yourself from external stimuli and sit in stillness, even briefly, the nervous system begins to settle. The baseline level of dopamine starts to stabilize, making room for genuine satisfaction to return, not from novelty, but from depth. Sacred solitude teaches you to be with yourself without needing constant hits of stimulation. And in doing so, you reclaim power over your attention and emotional state. Another powerful benefit of solitude is that it creates space for self-honesty. When you're constantly around others or plugged into content, it's easy to avoid the inner dialogue. But in solitude, there is no distraction, only reflection. This is where real transformation begins. You begin to see where you are out of alignment, what you've been avoiding, and what needs to change. The discomfort that sometimes arises in solitude is not a problem. It's a signal. It shows you what you've buried under busyness. And if you stay with it, if you don't reach for the phone or the noise, that discomfort becomes clarity. Productivity is often associated with movement, output, and visible progress. But some of the most productive work you can do is thinking clearly, feeling deeply, and connecting to your purpose. All of that begins in solitude. It is the preparation before the action, the stillness before the strike. Great artists, scientists, leaders, and thinkers throughout history have all had practices of intentional solitude. When they understood that stepping away from the world is not abandoning it, it's how you return to it with strength, vision, and direction. You do not need hours of isolation to experience this shift. Even a few minutes of intentional solitude each day, without devices, without talking, without distractions, can begin to change your brain. It signals to your system that you are safe, that you don't need to perform, and that your internal world matters. Over time, this daily practice becomes a sanctuary. It becomes a space where you reconnect with who you are beneath the roles, beneath the pressure, beneath the expectations. Solitude doesn't disconnect you. It reconnects you. It clears away the noise so that your inner compass can recalibrate. And once that happens, you no longer seek direction outside of yourself. You begin to move through the world, not reactively, but responsively, not chasing attention, but choosing presence. Sacred solitude becomes your source of strength. And in that space, you remember who you are and why you're here. Not lonely, just fully, finally aligned. The human brain is wired to assess, evaluate, and measure. This capacity once served a vital evolutionary purpose, helping us identify danger, locate opportunity, and find our place within a tribe. But in the modern world, especially in the age of constant exposure to curated lives and filtered realities, this neural mechanism of comparison has turned from a survival tool into a source of chronic distraction and self-doubt. When you engage in comparison, especially unregulated and unconscious comparison, you flood your nervous system with conflicting signals. The mind begins scanning for how you measure up, and in doing so, it diverts precious cognitive resources away from your own path, your own progress, and your own purpose. This is what makes comparison neural noise. Noise, in a neurological sense, refers to input that interferes with the brain's ability to focus on signal. Signal is clarity, what matters most, what's real, what's aligned with your unique direction. Noise, on the other hand, is everything that pulls you off course. When you compare yourself to others, how they look, how fast they're moving, how loudly they're succeeding, you amplify that noise. Your brain becomes cluttered with irrelevant data points. Instead of reinforcing the neural pathways related to your own goals and actions, it becomes entangled in the circuitry of envy, insecurity, and distraction. The real cost of comparison isn't just emotional, it's biological. When you perceive someone as more successful or further along than you, especially in domains you care about, the brain often interprets that as a threat to your status. This activates the stress response, increasing cortisol and narrowing your focus in a way that makes creative problem solving harder. It can even suppress dopamine, the very molecule responsible for driving motivation and forward action. In other words, comparison doesn't just make you feel worse psychologically, it can impair your neurochemical ability to take action at all. It's important to understand that your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what you pay attention to. So if your attention is consumed by comparison, you are literally teaching your nervous system to prioritize external metrics over internal mastery. You are building neural pathways that lead you away from your own development. The more you reinforce those pathways, the more automatic they become. You may not even realize you're comparing anymore. It becomes an unconscious lens through which you view your work, your worth, and your life. But the moment you recognize comparison as noise, you create a powerful shift. You can begin to reframe your attention. Instead of asking, how am I doing compared to them? You ask, how am I doing compared to who I was yesterday? This subtle shift is more than mindset. It's neuroscience. It directs the brain's reward system back toward progress, effort, and consistency rather than outcomes and appearances. This activates dopaminergic pathways in a sustainable way. It reinforces motivation that is based on growth, not validation. Over time, that internal orientation becomes stronger and the noise weakens. Eliminating comparison entirely isn't the goal. Some forms of observation can inspire and inform. But inspiration becomes interference when it turns into obsession. The key is to become discerning about your inputs. What are you feeding your mind? Who are you watching and why? Does their example pull you into alignment with your values? Or does it fracture your focus? You get to choose what becomes signal and what becomes noise. When you reduce comparison, you reduce friction in the brain. You free up energy that can be reinvested in creativity, discipline, and presence. You allow the nervous system to attune to your personal mission rather than constantly recalibrating based on someone else's journey. The brain thrives on focus. It thrives on repetition of what matters. When you let go of comparison, you don't lose perspective. You gain clarity. And with clarity, your path becomes quieter, sharper, and entirely your own. Purpose is not just a poetic idea. It is a neurological anchor. When your brain knows why it's doing something, it will endure more, focus longer, and recover faster. Purpose activates systems deep in the limbic brain that govern emotion, motivation, and even pain tolerance. It creates a physiological advantage, not just a psychological one. When the body wants to quit, but the mind is aligned with purpose, something extraordinary happens. The circuits that drive persistence stay online. The system keeps going even when it's tired, uncertain, or afraid. There's a deep relationship between meaning and effort. The more meaning something holds for you, the more effort your brain and body are willing to allocate toward it. In neuroscience, this is tied to the concept of value-based decision making. The prefrontal cortex evaluates whether something is worth it, and this judgment directly affects how much energy your nervous system is willing to expend. Purpose increases the perceived value of your goals, which in turn increases the amount of neurochemical and physical resources you're willing to apply in their direction. When purpose is present, dopamine is released not just when you achieve a goal, but when you make progress toward it. This is critical. It means you don't need constant wins to stay motivated. You just need forward movement in alignment with your purpose. This system allows for long-term persistence, even through setbacks. Without purpose, the same effort can feel empty, exhausting, or even pointless. But when the work is connected to something deeper, something bigger than comfort or appearance, your system becomes resilient. You're not just grinding, you're building something that matters. Purpose also enhances your ability to handle pain and uncertainty. Studies have shown that people who feel connected to a strong sense of meaning experience less suffering from the same physical pain as those who feel aimless. This is because the brain integrates purpose into the way it processes discomfort. When the mind knows why the pain exists, it reframes it as useful rather than threatening. The pain becomes part of the process, not a reason to quit. Persistence then becomes possible not because the pain disappears, but because it becomes meaningful. There's also a time element to purpose. When you're anchored in a larger why, you begin to see the present moment as part of a bigger timeline. The daily grind, the discipline, the repetition, these things no longer feel like meaningless loops. They become sacred steps in a long-term mission. And when the brain is context, it becomes more patient. You don't panic in the face of slow progress because you understand that the pace matters less than the direction. You don't compare your timeline to others because you know your journey is about fulfillment, not performance. Purpose helps you regulate energy and emotion. When your why is clear, your focus sharpens. Your priorities organize themselves. You don't waste energy on distractions or things that dilute your attention. You become more efficient, not because you're rushing, but because your system is synchronized. Purpose acts like a compass. It filters out what doesn't matter so you can put more of yourself into what does. That sustained focus leads to sustained progress, and sustained progress is the root of true persistence. When you forget your purpose, everything becomes heavier. Doubt creeps in. Fatigue becomes overwhelming. Discipline starts to crack. But when you return to purpose, when you remind yourself what's at stake, who you're becoming, or who you're serving, you restore your internal drive. It doesn't always remove the challenge, but it transforms your relationship with it. You stop asking, how long will this take? And start thinking, how far can I go? That's the true power of purpose. It turns survival into creation. It turns effort into devotion. And in a world filled with distractions, it is the one thing that keeps you locked into the mission, no matter how long it takes. So remember this, persistence is not born from sheer willpower alone. It's sustained by purpose. When your actions are aligned with something greater than comfort, ego, or instant gratification, you unlock a deeper level of endurance that cannot be faked or forced. You stop chasing momentum and start building legacy. In the silence of struggle, in the repetition of effort, in the quiet moments where no one applauds, you are not losing time. You are forging strength. Purpose transforms pain into power and turns obstacles into teachers. Anchor yourself in it, return to it daily, and let it drive you forward. Because when your why is unshakable, your how will always rise to meet it. Stay the path. You're not just surviving,